The viewport is our view into our world. It allows us to see what is inside of our level, manipulate those items, and basically visually work with everything. So we're going to take a quick look at it. Our viewport is this giant item in the middle of our screen where we can view our project. We can see what we're working on. And it has a few options. In the top left corner, we have our viewport options. This controls the way the viewport works and what we can see inside of it. For example, we can toggle things like real time and frames per second on. We can adjust our field of view if we want to change it to better match our project. We can toggle cinematic preview on and on. This gives us play controls if we're viewing a cinematic. We have game view, which I'll cover shortly in more detail, and immersive mode, which is basically full screen for the viewport and can be toggled here or with the F11 key. Below this, we have bookmarks. This gives us the ability to jump quickly from one spot to another. You can see here I have 3 bookmarks. I can click on each of them and jump directly to a bookmark, or use the 1, 2, and 3 key on my keyboard to jump to preset bookmarks. If I move my view to somewhere I want, use the control and the number key, I can now have a new bookmark. I can jump from 3 to my new bookmark of 4, which you can see here I now have a new bookmark I set using the control option. You can also clear them here. Layouts gives us the ability to change how many viewports we have available. By default, we have 1. We can go to layouts and we can have 2, 3, or 4 in different configurations. These are just the defaults. I can go here, I can choose 3 panes. Now we have 3 viewports. Each viewport is independent. They can all change the way that they appear as well as they're shaded. So for example, this one is top wireframe. I could change that to maybe left and unlit mode, and now I would have a left unlit viewport independent of the other 2 viewports. I'm going to go ahead and reset these back to default. Now the options next to this are the way our viewports look and the way they are shaded, and also visualization options. So by default we have our perspective view, but we could change this to any of the orthographic views by using the shortcuts or by clicking the options. And then we have our view mode. By default we're going to have lit. We can change this to unlit, or we can change this to wireframe, or any of the other modes that allow us to better visualize our options. And all these details are covered in the documentation. Lastly, we have show. This changes the way the editor shows different parts of your project, and this is for the editor only. So for example, maybe I don't want to see the grid. The grid is this item over here that we use for snapping and various other placement. If I don't want to see it anymore, I can go to show grid, and now the grid will disappear. I can go back to show grid, and now I can view it. Now by default, we're in the editor mode. This is where we can see things like our icons for our actors. We have our game view. It's the G button, or clicking here, and now you'll notice our icons disappear. The game view tries to give you a more game view or project view looking view. It's very similar to if you were to preview it in the editor or standalone mode. It's a quick way of visualizing what it might look like when you run the project. They are separate views. Editor and game view are separate, and the show options are independent. Let me go back to this view. I'm going to grab this material and make my walls glow. Now if I'm working in here, I might start to have a problem because now I have this overwhelming bloom, and it's going to make my level design a little difficult. So I might want to go into show, post-processing bloom, and now it's a little better. Now I don't have the bloom effect. I can work on my editor. But now I want to preview what it looks like. Well, I can go into play, and it's going to show me what it looks like. Or I could go into play in standalone, and it's going to compile a few things and show me what it looks like. But maybe I want to see it quicker. Well, I'll hit my G key, and now I can see my bloom is re-enabled. I've disabled game view. I'm in editor view. Show, post-processing, bloom is unchecked. I will enable game view. I will go to show, post-processing, and now bloom is checked. These settings are independent of each other, and they are separate for those views only. So keep that in mind. You could have both of them not show the bloom, and maybe you just simply don't want the grid showing when you're in game view, but it's fine, we're in editor. It's your choice, it's your options. The upper right controls the way we work with the items inside of our view. If I click on an item, we'll click on this cube for example, we get our manipulator widget. And by default, it's going to look like this, and it's going to allow us to move or translate this object. Up here in the top right, we are showing we can select and translate this object, or we can use the W key as a shortcut. Next to that is rotate, or the E key, and scale, or the R key. So we can do W, E, and R to change through our tools, or the space bar to toggle to the next one. Once we have one we want, we can click on one of the manipulators here. Z is vertical, Y is going to be horizontal, usually left and right, and X is going to usually be forward and backwards, or the red one. We can click on them and move the item as such. You can also click on the combined widget. For in this case, we'll click on these two. It's going to be our Y and our Z. It allows us to move it on the Y and the Z at the same time. Now you may notice it's snapping in the world view. I move this item around based on the world's X, Y, and Z. If I click on the manipulator next to this, this will toggle between world and local view. So let's say we take this item, we're going to rotate it, and now it's going to be angled like this. If I want to move this in the direction the item is facing, I need to use local view. World view, relative to the world. Click the icon local view. It's relative to the items itself and its local axes. I'm going to go ahead and reset that back to default. Next to this, we have our snapping options. We have how the item snaps when we translate, how the item snaps when we rotate, and how the item snaps when we move it. By default, it's going to be set to grid snapping. Surface snapping is an option you can enable here. Grid snapping means the item will snap to the grid that we can see here. Now I have a cube. We'll go ahead and we'll look at our cube here, and we can see that it's kind of off. It's not really snapped to this grid. If we were to move it, it's going to look weird. Well, my snapping's set to 100, and my grid, as you can see, is set to 100. But my X and the Y aren't multiples of 100. It's kind of off. Let me change my snapping to something like 10. Now my grid will get smaller, and now you can see it moves in increments of 10. Maybe set to increments of 5, and the grid will adjust accordingly to whatever you've set it up as. And these are adjustable inside of the editor preferences. This is for toggling on and off the translate snapping, so you can see now it will not snap. And we have the same options here for our rotational snapping and degrees, and our scaling snapping and the units for scale snap. Lastly, we have the ability to change the speed at which our camera moves. Well, this isn't very helpful because we don't know how to use that. We don't know how to actually move our camera. Well, it's pretty simple. If you've played a first-person shooter game, or you've used a recent digital content creation software package, maybe Maya or Moto or Max, it has the same layout. The right mouse button toggles the ability to look around. I'm holding the right mouse button, and we can now look around. When I let go, I move my mouse. The W, A, S, and D keys allow us to move left, right, forwards, and backwards relative to our way our viewport camera is looking. So you can see I'm flying around by holding the right mouse button and using my W, A, S, and D keys. And if we want, we can use the Q and the E key to go down and up. Now if you're wanting to move faster or slower, now we can adjust our camera speed. But let's say we go to like 6 and we're going pretty fast, but we want to get in close, and now we're going too fast, but we don't want to let go of our view. You can use the mouse wheel while you're holding the right mouse button to speed up or slow down by rotating it in or out, and that gives you a faster or slower view. Lastly, we have the focus. So let's say we are somewhere else and we want to find something. Let's say we are in a different part of our map and we want to get back to our player. If we know where our player start is in our hierarchy, or we can see it, we can click on that item to have it selected, hit the F to focus key, and now you're going to go and zoom in and focus on that object. Up next, we're going to cover the world outliner. It's basically an outline of all the actors available to us in our world.